what are some of the alternatives that you offer your sellers?
Well, first of all, I talked to them about, the pros and cons of allowing somebody to lock up the business and the pros and cons of either countering back. They can counter back with no exclusivity. They can counter back and they can say, fine, we'll give you want a 30-day due diligence, we'll give you a 30-day lockup, and that's it. Either go or no go. There's also, it's like, you want to tie my business up for the next 30 days? Well, then you need to pay me for that. There's a price, right? There's got to be an exchange of value. And so the seller, obviously, it's, for them to allow somebody to lock up the business, cut off all their marketing, not be able to talk to any other prospective buyers and all of that, that is an expensive proposition to a seller potentially. So if a buyer wants to pay for that privilege, that's one thing. But if they don't and they want to do it all on a no money down thing, it's like, well, we'll give you access to a data room. We'll let you do your due diligence without locking up the business. Meanwhile, we're going to continue talking to other prospective buyers. So I just discourage it depending on the size of the deal and the buyers. A lot of times I'll just discourage a seller from doing it, because same thing with, same reason the seller notes. I mean, if a buyer is looking for a good business, which they are, and this is a good business, then let them look. And if they want it, then they can make an offer. If they make an actual offer that's binding and they have a contract, well, that's a different story. Now you have a contract. But if all they're doing is putting in a non-binding LOI and wanting to lock up the business with that, is kind of like, no,
I'm guessing this is all predicated on that you've vetted the sellers and you're not representing sellers who are putting money under the table, and these are good businesses that you feel comfortable that the sellers and the buyers will end up turning a profit after they take over.
Yes. Yeah, I don't work with a lot of small retail that does a lot of, skims a lot of cash and all of that. And if they do, I tell them right up front that whatever cash you're skimming, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist. If you didn't declare it on your tax returns, it doesn't exist. So, if you want a broker that's going to try and say, hey, you take, the seller takes home an extra 10, 20 grand in his back pocket every month, I'm not the broker for you. I don't do that. If I don't have a documented proof of something, then it doesn't exist. But that's me. And that's because I have a lot to risk, and I'm not willing to risk it over a 10 or 20 grand commission. That's just,
Tanya,
Diane.
Yes, good morning, Tanya. How do you start the conversation with the seller after you listing 3 months and there is no offer? How do you start to
Well, I mean, I think you just well, they know there's been no offers too. So the way I start the conversation is just, hey, we need to take a look at the numbers and see if maybe we need to do a price adjustment. But I also ask them what's their motivation level, because some are willing to wait. Everything is time versus money, right? So somebody who wants a quick sale is going to have to reduce the price in order to get a quick sale. It's going to have to be under market.
Yes.
Right? But, and somebody who wants top dollar, they're probably going to need to hang on for a while, because it typically takes longer to sell a business with top dollar than it does if if somebody wants a quick sale and you can do it at a discounted rate.
Yes, thank you. That makes sense. Yeah.
Time versus money, and you just have a candid conversation with them.
But you don't ask them, you don't tell them you need to lower your asking price. You don't suggest them to do that, no?
Well, after 90 days, I get their new financials. It's like, let me see your recent financials. Let's take a look at what is the business going up? Is it going down? Is it stable? Top line revenue versus last year. So, I mean, I look at the numbers and let the numbers dictate the conversation, because if business is climbing, then we readjust in marketing to show the higher numbers. And if the business is declining, then we're going to do the same thing, right? We're going to have to adjust the marketing to reflect the lower numbers, but along with the lower numbers, we're going to have a candid conversation about reducing the price because the business is declining. So it's not going to sell at the price that we originally listed it for if 3 months later the business is declining, right?
But if the sale go up and then no offer, we still need to adjust or reduce the number if the sale go
No,
up.
I mean, if the sales are going up and the discretionary earnings are going up, then you can change what's in the marketing system to reflect the increased numbers. Leave the price alone, but just that increase in the revenue and SDE might help you to get more interest from different buyers. And then also understand that when buyers are searching for businesses, some of them are looking for a certain amount of revenue or a certain amount of cash flow or even a certain price. So, you know, if you have a business that's listed for 359,000, right? You're missing every buyer out there whose budget is who's looking for up to 350,000. So usually when buyers are searching, they're searching in those increments of like 325, 350, 375. They're looking in those ranges. So look at your pricing model too. And it could be that you can make a minor adjustment that would bring you an entire new batch of buyers, of prospective buyers that are seeing your ads.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Tanya, I'd like to comment on Diane's. If you use, well, what I would do is if I use updated financials that show an increase in the cash flow and the revenue, and they're not from the tax returns, because that's what I advertise, the latest tax return values that I calculate from the tax returns. I'd put a note down at the bottom that these are, you know, that those numbers are from updated financials.
Right.
Oh, thank you, Pam.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And also, Pam, it depends on the time of the year, because right now in January we're going to use. Most people don't have their tax returns done for 2024. Right. So if you're using 2023 tax returns, you're a year behind. And so you can use the 2024 numbers for the full year if you have them, or if you don't, then yeah, I agree. You just put a note in there that says what the source is. You can put that in there, or at least after somebody inquires, and whatever the materials are that you send out to them, you make sure that it's very clear, you know, where those numbers are coming from.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
If possible, I'd like to circle back around to your exchange of value. When buyers are asking to lock up the business, I typically request funds to go in escrow that'll be applied to the purchase price. Are you indicating that the buyer would put up money that goes directly to the seller for locking up their business, or are those funds going to be applied to the purchase price if we get to the closing?
Well, again, it depends on the situation. So I've seen some LOIs that have small non-refundable deposits.
Okay.
And it also depends on the lockup period. So, you know, you might say, fine, you know, we want a deposit, a good faith deposit, put into escrow, and it will be applied to the purchase price if you purchase. And if you don't, a certain amount of that deposit goes hard after, you know, 30 days, it becomes non-refundable or whatever. There's so many different ways you can structure things, but the truth of the matter is, all we want to do is level the playing field.
Right.
A buyer should not have the ability to wear out the seller and just simply by requesting over and over and over different documents and all of that, when all they have is a non-binding letter of
I
intent.
agree.
And they have, you know, I mean, they can walk away at any time. So, and I've even seen LOIs that come in that they have that exclusivity period. So it says that buyer or seller can terminate the LOI at any time. But if seller terminates the LOI, the exclusivity period still stands, and seller cannot talk to any other buyers until after that exclusivity period lapses. So you're penalizing a seller for wanting to market their business. So basically the way it's working these days, or what I'm seeing a lot more of, is these buyers that just say, hey, I like that business, I think, so let me try and lock that one up. Meanwhile, as a buyer, I'm still looking at all these. Ooh, I like that one too. Let me lock that one. And so they'll lock up multiple businesses. And in my mind, it's like, hey, wait a second. If you're going to lock up the seller's business, then you shouldn't be out searching for anything else either. All your activity, you're telling the seller he can't go talk to any more buyers, then you, Mr. Buyer, shouldn't be able to go talk to any more sellers either, because fair is fair, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how I see it, but a lot of people don't see businesses being fair. They're not looking for fair, they're looking for an advantage.
Right.
And so who has the advantage when the seller's business is locked up for 90 to 120 days?
Yeah.
Is there an advantage there?
I don't see that to the seller.
No.
I think it's a distinct advantage to the buyer, right?
True.
So,
have you come across many sellers, many buyers that are, they have cash injection money, but they're not willing to put it toward the equity of the business, and are asking the seller to carry the full 10% equity?
I've seen
an influx of it.
A couple of interesting deals, but I think there are a couple of lenders out there that are, Huntington Bank might be one of them, where they're doing they're only requiring like 2 or 3% from the buyer, and the balance of that 10% can be from the seller. So you end up with a 2% cash injection from the buyer and 8% from the seller, and then the lender puts in 90%. The problem with that structure, and I've talked to a couple other lenders about it, is it very rarely pencils out.
Very rarely does what?
It rarely pencils out. The numbers don't work. And unless the price of the business is discounted. So it's, yeah, I mean, from the lender standpoint, when they're looking at the debt ratio and they're looking at, you know, the cash flow sufficient to pay the debt service, you know, your debt service coverage, and now you have, you know, the buyer's only coming in with 2%, and they've got to pay, you know, the seller note in addition to the bank note, and it just rarely pencils out. So, but I've seen it requested. The only way to make it work is to drop the price of the business.
Yeah. It was offensive to me when I had a buyer string me along and finally make that offer. I'm thinking, you're kidding me. We don't use other people's money like that.
Well, that's one thing that I can tell you is that what's offensive to you and what's offensive to me may not be offensive to the seller. So,
well, and it was to him. I mean, he was not happy at all. But still, yeah, you're right. You're right. And I have a challenge with that. You know,
I know. Well, yeah, and it's all in presentation, right? Because we still have to present everything in the best light to the sellers and be very neutral. And, you know, I had a conversation with a seller the other night, and, you know, somebody offered, they put in an LOI, which was ridiculous, at maybe 60% of the asking price. And to me, it's very low. and especially for what this business is doing. But I just had a very, interesting conversation with the seller and just said, hey, I don't know your circumstances. I don't know, there may be an urgency factor that I'm unaware of. There may be something else. So this offer, in my opinion, is very low. However, depending on your circumstances, it may be very beneficial for you. So it's not for me to judge, right? And it's, but we talked about things that we could do to get it up a bit further. And we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes. And meanwhile, we have other interested buyers that hopefully will be
Stronger.
a little more motivated. Yeah. So it is interesting, the marketplace these days.